Hello guys, it's Ben here from Next Gen Base, and due to the overwhelming response of the last frame rate analysis video that we did, we've decided to give it another go. So we took some requests, and here are the games. We've got 8 more games for you today. Today we're taking a look first at Infamous Second Son. Now, Infamous Second Son, obviously an early PS4 game, and you can see here, running on the PS4 Pro, the frame rate is kind of all over the place. I mean, it still plays well, it still looks fairly good, but there is a resolution mode. That's what this is set to, not the frame rate mode, but this kind of, as you can see, wavers anywhere between 30 and 60 very occasionally. But when we switch over to the PS5 version, you can already see this is essentially just a straight line, again at 60 frames a second. It is completely locked. No matter what I did, I couldn't get the game to run lower than 60 frames a second in the resolution mode. So if you're planning on, going through some back-compat games, Infamous Second Son, very enjoyable game, very, lots of fun powers and stuff. I mean, it looks fantastic as well still. And you can now play it in the unlocked frame rate at 60 frames a second, which, I mean, it's impressive. It really is. This is, again, without a patch. So, next game that we're moving on to today is Fall Guys. Now, Fall Guys did initially run at 30 frames a second on the PS4 Pro in the multiplayer. Obviously, Fall Guys is an entirely multiplayer game, but when you got to certain levels, it did tend to run at 30, and that was quite noticeable because the intros and stuff all ran at 60. So I played a few games and noticed here that, yeah, it's fairly solid at 60. I mean, on the PS4 Pro, there are some frame time skips and things like that. What you noticed, if the frame rate looked like it dropped, the whole game renders at 60 frames a second, but your character can sometimes, render a little bit less. So whether that's down to lag or whatever, I'm not entirely sure. But yeah, I mean, on the PS5, Fall Guys runs again at a solid locked 60 frames a second. And again, if there's any instances where the character looks like it's skipped, then that is just the rendering of the character rather than the rendering of the game. Next up was a game that was requested. We had a lot of requests for this one, and this is Fallout 4. Now, this is a game that I do believe runs at 60 frames a second on the Xbox Series consoles. The PS4 version of Fallout 4, though, has not yet had a patch, so it is limited at a game level to 30 frames a second, and then just jumping into where we sort of exit the vault into the big wide world, you can see that it stays locked at that 30 frames a second. Unfortunately, at the minute, there isn't anything that we can do to kind of override that. It is just completely locked at that 30 frames. So if we get might get a patch from Bethesda to enable a 60 frames a second mode, because we've got no doubts that the PS5 is capable of running it. But it definitely looks really sharp and looks really nice. So yeah, there we go. Okay, the next game that we've got is Grand Theft Auto 5, and this is another game that I believe will be getting a free upgrade to a PS5 version shortly. So at the moment, we're limited to the PS4's frame rate and resolution. So it runs at 30 frames a second. It is completely locked, so you will be... If you're expecting massive boosts from performance for GTA 5 at the moment, you're probably going to be a little bit disappointed, but it still plays, it still looks really nice, and it's still a great game. We also had a request to jump into Grand Theft Auto Online. Now, I don't really play GTA Online, but again, this is another one that will be getting a free PS5 version or a free PS5 upgrade, so I believe it's actually free to play on the PS5. So I jumped into GTA Online and did what you do in that game, nicked a car, but again, solid 30 frames a second, didn't waver from that at all. I did try, crashing the car and winding some people up online, but couldn't get it to budge from that 30 frames. So again, if you're expecting 60 frames a second, you might just need to wait for that PS5 version to be released. The next game that we picked up was one that was actually specifically requested because it didn't run all that well on the base consoles. Now this is Everybody's Gone to the Rapture. I don't have PS4 Pro footage of that just at the moment, but it didn't run particularly well on the base PS4, and the PS4 Pro struggled at times to kind of hit anything steady. But as you can see here, once again, this is another game that benefits from the backwards compatibility on the PlayStation 5. And it's running at a solid 60 frames a second. Again, I mean, it's not that busy a game. You can see if you haven't played it, it's a walking simulator in the realest possible sense. But the game ran at an absolutely rock solid 60 frames a second for me while I was playing it. One game that has already been patched for PlayStation 5 performance is Days Gone. So Days Gone it's received an update which will run at what they call dynamic 4K, so it will kind of render at as close to 4K as it can possibly get while trying to achieve that 60 frames a second. As you can see here, it manages to do so. For the most part, when you, I think in a second or two, when we see the Horde for the first time, it does drop a little bit, but it's definitely not noticeable in game. It kind of drops down to about 58, 57 or so. But on the whole, played a couple of hours of Days Gone, and yeah, nothing really major to report there in terms of in terms of frame rate drops. It's a solid patch to an underrated game. I think Days Gone was a game that didn't quite get maybe the love that it needed, but you can see there the Horde is essentially running after me. In the PS4 version, that would have absolutely tanked the frame rate. So yeah, very solid upgrade to Days Gone. God of War is the next one, and this is running in the favour resolution mode right now. Again, it's one of those that at the minute, if you run in the 4K mode, it just runs at 30 frames a second. Apologies for the colours. The colours seem really blown out in this one. I think that is to do with the fact that it's potentially pulled in some settings from when I played it on the PS4. But yeah, as soon as you see the favour performance mode go on there, you can immediately see it jump to 60 frames a second. This does render the game in 1080p, and I believe there is some upscaling and all the rest of it that's going on, but it still looks fantastic, and yeah, so it plays at a solid locked 60. And the final game that we're taking a look at today is an early PlayStation 4 exclusive in the form of Until Dawn. Now, Until Dawn, I didn't realise until there was a few comments made on that first video that it does in fact have an unlocked frame rate. So playing it on the PS4 Pro kind of results in not so great performance. I mean, it is kind of all over the shop. You can see here that we go anywhere from, sort of just around 30 frames a second down to the 20s, and you can get up to close to about 60 in certain areas on Until Dawn, but it's a really strange one. It doesn't look like it should be struggling all that much, particularly I think if they had a mode where you could lock the frame rate to 30, I think it might be a bit better. But overall, yeah, the performance, as I say here, is kind of all over the place. This is still running on the PS4 Pro, so you can see when you're in like the gameplay kind of sequences, the frame rate definitely picks up, but again, it's definitely not solid in any way, shape or form. PS5 is definitely going to run this better, as you will see in just a second. So here we are on the PS5. This is the exact same scene as we saw at the beginning. There are a few dips to kind of, very high 50s in here, but on the whole, the game runs at near enough locked. I mean, after this scene, I kept recording and I kept some footage, and as you'll see in just a second, the game essentially stays locked at a solid 60 frames a second. So it gives you an idea of just how much power the PS5 has over the PS4 Pro. Whether this is down to CPU power or GPU power, I don't really know, but definitely an absolute beast of a performer when it comes to Until Dawn. yeah, you can see here again, this is the same area that we had the gameplay from, and it's locked. It is just a solid locked 60 frames per second. Not 100% sure on the resolution, so don't quote me on that, sorry, but I think ultimately, for me at least, performance, 60 frames a second modes are the key for me. I much prefer playing a game, if it's got a slightly lower resolution but a solid frame rate, and the PS5 definitely offers that up for Until Dawn. So thank you for joining me, guys. If you have enjoyed this video, please do drop us a like, leave us a comment, let us know which games you'd like to see tested. To be honest with you, we don't, there are some games that people have requested that we don't have access to at the moment, so unfortunately we won't be able to test every game, but hopefully this gives you a bit more of an idea of what the PS5 is capable of with backwards compatible titles. As ever, like I said, subscribe to the channel, and we'll have some more content very soon. Okay, cheers guys, bye bye.